Hello. Olive trees. 4 in the border, in the ground, planted into the ground to my right, and 2 here in pots. Welcome back to Mark's garden at Rose Cottage near Nantwich in Cheshire. Today I'm going to talk to you about olive tree winter care. More specifically, the steps that I'm going to take to protect my olive trees as we head into the winter season. Now you'll see here that I'm holding on to some horticultural fleece which I've just bought off Amazon, and there's a link to that product in the description box below this video. And full disclosure, if you buy one of those through that link, I will receive a commission, and your support is greatly appreciated. I'll talk to you about the horticultural fleece in a moment, but for now, some of the finer points of olive trees and olive tree care before we start talking about olive tree winter protection. As you can see, these 2 are in pots. These are the 2 I rescued from Morrison's supermarket earlier in the year. And in rescuing them, I repotted them and I put lots of drainage in the soil, beneath the soil, and I put a gravel mulch on top and I pruned them right back and I gave them a good wash, and they've really sprung back into life. I'm so pleased with the progress of these 2 olive plants. And I think if I was to say one thing about olive tree care, it would be drainage. They hate having wet roots, and what I do is I put lots of drainage in the bottom of the pot, I add grit to the soil, and then I allow them to almost completely dry out between watering and in pots. As you can see, these 2 are in pots. I leave a gap at the top of the pot so that I can really drench them when it comes to watering them and give them a good drenching, allow that water to soak in, and then I fill it up 2 or 3 times so that they're really drenched, and then I do allow them to dry out almost between watering. And you can see the results. These 2 olive trees have sprung back into life and they're covered in beautiful lush green growth. I've even pruned these already back again because I want to encourage a nice tight globe shape at the top. My other 4, however, are planted in the ground. Here, as you can see, along this long Mediterranean style scented border. Now I've had these 4 olive trees for about 5 years. I think we're going into their 5th winter. I've got photographs of those 4 olive trees covered in snow. So one thing I would say when it comes to winter protection is, let's not be too precious about olive trees. Some of these plants survive to 400 or 500 years old in their native country. They must be pretty hardy plants. And sometimes I think there's a risk that we can kill them with kindness. Nevertheless, this is the first season that they've been planted in the ground, and therefore I can't readily move them to a sheltered spot. Having said that, they are planted in a relatively sheltered spot in the lee of this wall. The prevailing wind comes from over there in that direction, so they will be protected from the prevailing wind. We have a very sandy soil here, and about 18 inches below the soil there is pure sand, so they're very well drained. I've also put weed fabric and about 3 inches of gravel mulch on top of those olive trees. And that deep layer of gravel will act as a kind of mulch and prevent deep penetrating frost from entering into the soil. So if you can apply a mulch around the root ball of your olive tree, all the better. It doesn't have to be gravel, any mulch will do. Organic material about 2 or 3 inches thick. So now is where I really start to talk about olive tree winter care proper, because there's a couple of differences in the way I'm going to treat the ones here which are planted in the ground to the ones here in pots. These 2 I'm going to move to a sheltered location. I have a compound at the back of the garden, and I'll put them in that compound and I'll just leave them. I won't water them. They've got good drainage, and I'll stop watering them and I'll just leave them. I'm not going to give them any other protection other than just leaving them in a sheltered space for the winter time. Now, I have to say, mine have got very good, well-drained soil. So whilst there will be some rain, most of it will drain through, because the risk is if you let these plants have waterlogged roots, which then freeze in a pot, that's really going to set the plant back. So my advice would be, make sure you've got well-drained soil. If it's not well-drained soil, consider putting it somewhere sheltered from a lot of rain, because what you don't want is for those roots to get waterlogged and sodden and then freeze. So if mine weren't well drained, I would move them to a sheltered place, maybe under a porch. But if I was going to put them somewhere where they got absolutely no water, I would make sure that they didn't dry out completely. So those two small olive trees in pots are now out of a prevailing wind in a sheltered position for the winter. Now let's turn our attention to these four, which are actually planted in the earth, and clearly I'm not going to start digging them up and moving them to a sheltered position, which is where this horticultural fleece comes in. And this comes in a variety of sizes here, as you can see on the packaging. I've chosen the one that's 2 meters by 10 meters because I will need at least 2 meters to go over the top of my large olive trees. As you can see here, good for frost over winter protection. You can wrap plants in it and it's robust enough for more than one season. And there, for protection against sleet, wind and frost. I'm just unwrapping this fleece now, and I will cut off a piece appropriately sized for the olive tree to demonstrate what I would do with it in the event that these olives needed winter protection. So I need a piece that's approximately square. It's 2 meters wide. So if we take a diagonal across there, that will tell us where 2 meters is. And then I shall just use these sewing scissors to cut it across. The nice thing about these things is when they come in the packaging, they're all folded up, so you can just follow the line of a crease, and that gives you a good line to cut along. So there's our nice piece, which we'll use to go around the top of one of the olives. I'll just put the other bit to one side. So clearly this is going to go over the head of this olive tree. I've got some string ready. Before I start fumbling around with that, I'm going to get a couple of short pieces cut off and ready so that they're to hand. So I shall place that in my pocket where I can get hold of it. And then really it's just a simple question of wrapping the top of the olive, bringing it down to the trunk like that. Now you might want to spend a bit more time making a neater job of it. For the purposes of this video, I shall just continue as we are, making sure that all the edges are pulled nicely in and there's a good seal around the bottom, around the trunk. And you can see now why I needed a 2 meter square piece. As I'm doing this now, I'm thinking perhaps it might have been a better idea to do this on a less windy day, but nevertheless, we shall persist and we shall succeed in the end as I continue to waffle. Isn't this fun? There we are, that's now completely wrapped. Take the string and just get hold of that. Wrap it around a few times. Now if you wished, you could cut off the excess at the bottom here, and I will probably do that to tidy it up. But I have to say, going back to something I said earlier about being overly precious, I'm actually going to unwrap this olive tree because I don't think it needs protection yet. We're still in mid to late September. I will only put this protection on this olive tree if we have a hard, and I mean very, very hard, frost forecast, because I'm quite confident that these will survive in the UK under most of our winter conditions. As I've said, I've got pictures of these covered in snow. And one thing I would do, however, is I would take the scissors and I would just pinch it and just cut a nick in, just to let some ventilation in, because I don't want mildew to start forming underneath there, and I'll do that on all four sides of the plant, so that there's a little bit of ventilation allowed through on all four sizes. This bit here needs tidying up and pulling in. So of course do get fabric which is big enough to cover the whole of the crown of your olive tree. Now, people have asked me about whether it's okay to take olive trees inside for the winter, and I'm in two minds really as to whether I would do that. And I think my approach would be that if I had a cool porch or a cool conservatory, I would consider bringing them in and vastly reducing the watering regime. Certainly wouldn't feed them, because there's a danger if you bring them into too different an environment, too hot, centrally heated, warm an environment. The bark on the trunk might crack, and where it cracks it might let in disease. So I'd be tempted to just leave the plants outdoors where they can have a gradual cooling off in the winter or autumn and a gradual heating up in the springtime. For me, the biggest danger is not the cold, it's wet roots. So drainage, drainage, drainage. I'm actually now, whilst I'm talking to you, going to cut this off again because I don't feel this merits winter protection just yet. We've still got some good light and possibly even some warm temperatures to enjoy before the year is over. So I'll leave my olives exposed to that and they can store up some energy for the winter season. Hope you've enjoyed that and found it useful and informative. These are quite valuable trees and they're quite long lived, so you do become attached to them, so I can understand anyone wanting to protect them, and I will certainly give these protection if I have a very, very cold forecast, but until then that will remain off. Don't forget to like the video if you've enjoyed it, and of course subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and comment below because it's always good to hear from you. If you hit the notifications bell, you'll also find out about my forthcoming videos. I'm about to do a video on my exotic tropical border winter protection and also my colocasia winter protection. There's two or three other videos to come on winter protection, and I'll see you soon.